It was probably the hardest 72 hours of my life. Even just talking about it at this moment brings up a lot of anxiety for me. And I feel the same way that I felt at that moment, which was really, really challenging.
Hello, you are listening to NPE Stories. This is a podcast where NPEs can share their story. I am your host, Lily, and I found out I was an NPE through an ancestry DNA test that changed my life forever. NPE is a term that stands for Not Parent Expected or Non-Paternal Event. This means that one or more of our parents are not who we believe them to be. NPE Stories is a podcast where NPEs can share their story of what their original family was like, how they found out they were an NPE, and what their journey has been like since the day they found out. And welcome to episode 211. I am recording this on a day that is very cold where I live in Minneapolis, Minnesota. It is -24. I'm serious about that. So the heat can't even keep up with it. -24. I don't know what it's like for the rest of the United States. I'm assuming not as cold as that, but I would love to find out, talk to my guest actually. So I'm going to go ahead and bring on my guest. Today I'm speaking with an NPE and I am speaking with Jennifer. Hi, Jennifer.
Hi, Lily.
Hi. Is it as freezing for you as it is for me?
It is pretty cold, not that cold, but it is pretty cold. I haven't left my house today, and so I am bundled up in a nice little warm blanket and, comfortable clothes, but it is very cold because I can feel it.
I am bundled up too. I even have my winter hat on, which is sounds a little funny, but just to keep my head warm. Well, I have a house full of kids. I hope you have some privacy where you're at.
I do. I have some kids here, but they're upstairs.
Okay. They're off school today. Mine are, so
Yes.
that's fine. We're making it work.
Yes, ma'am.
We're going to listen to your story today, and we're calling this episode, and feel free to correct me, Jennifer Ruiz story. Sorry, correct me on that one. I did that wrong, didn't I?
Not really, but the actual pronunciation is Ruiz.
Ruiz. Oh,
Yeah.
Thank you. I like to say it properly. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Jennifer Ruiz story. All right. So let's find out about your family of origin. Who was in your raising family? Anything you want to share about your childhood and what that was like?
Sure, I'd be happy to start there. Well, I was raised by it's hard to really pinpoint the whole thing without really going back, right? To like my grandma and things like that. So I was first born in the United States, so first generation Colombian-American. Both my parents are from Colombia, from South America, and I was born in New Jersey. At the time, my parents didn't have any family in the country whatsoever. They were alone, and they decided to send me back to their home country to alleviate the stress of babysitting. And as weird as that may sound, it's very common, right? Like I can't even imagine sending my children off to be raised by other people, like grandparents, just because that's not what we do, right? But for them as immigrants, it was actually easy because they knew that we were going to be safe and that we were going to be well taken care of. So my dad flew me down to Colombia, where my grandmother and extended family took care of me until I was from 6 months to about a year and a half. So for about a year. My understanding is that my mom went back for me, and little by little, she started bringing back her family to the United States. And so I was always around my grandmother. I have one older brother, 8 years older than myself, and that's how we grew up, in a very warm, loving, just a warm and loving family. Never, I mean, as a kid, never saw any problems, always saw my parents happy, hardworking. Both my parents worked 2 and 3 jobs each. So I didn't get to see them as often. So I was around my grandmother, my aunts, my cousins once they started coming over in the early 80s, mid 80s, late 80s, all the, like that decade was just our family coming over. And I just was just around happy people, loving, happy people. I remember being younger, like 8 years old, traveling back to Colombia with my dad. At 12 years old, we traveled. I remember not wanting a quinceañera party, but rather asked for a trip to Colombia. And my parents gave me that instead of having a big party that like was one night. I spent the whole summer. So I come from both sides, huge families, but I only got to see my dad's side when I traveled to Colombia. My mom's side, they all started trickling in, like I said, in the 80s. And that's how I was raised.
Are you the youngest then? If you had a brother that's 8 years older, are you the youngest sibling?
Yes, correct. For my original family, yes, just my
Yes.
brother and I. Yep.
How did your parents get along?
Wonderfully. My parents
Mm.
were amazing. My parents, I want to say that my mom was definitely a pioneer. She first moved herself, I want to say early 70s, like 71, maybe 72. I'm not clear on what year she came to the United States, but she came first. And then my dad followed about a year later. Just they come from really strong matriarch family, beginning with my grandmother. And so she was told by a friend that there was an opportunity in the United States to work. They're very poor in their home country. Both my parents have a fifth grade education, and that was very normal back then. They just did what's called primary, or what we would call elementary. And then after that, they would work and help the families. My dad comes from, he's one of 11 siblings, and my mom was one of 7 siblings. And so
Mm.
they helped. And so my dad was one of the older siblings, and my mom was the youngest, along with a twin. So my mom is a twin, and they worked hard. And culturally, where my family is from is just music is involved, food, gatherings, and they brought that part of their culture to New Jersey. So I just remember having a fun childhood surrounded by friends and family and parties. And my mom was like the hostess with the mostest, and my dad was just always there
Mm.
alongside her. Always got along very well. I can't ever recall them. Listen, I'm just gonna say my mom is very feisty, and she's very strong-willed and opinionated, and dad is just a little bit more relaxed, go with the flow. And she's was the boss. She still is the boss. And he was happy and content with that, and that was perfectly fine. I do remember as children, or just remembering when he had enough, we knew. Like if he was not okay with something, but he just was able to pick and choose his battles, is what I remember. And I really truly believe that they lived that happy wife, happy life type of, like that saying. And I found them to be mostly happy and content.
Mm. Oh, I can hear this strong matriarch family that you speak of. I
Hmm.
love it. Now let's talk a little bit about your NPE. Did you have any warning signs, any red flags, anything out of the ordinary in your youth that led you to believe you were an NPE?
None. None whatsoever. When I think back, I I initially want to say none, and then I start remembering the questions that I had. What do I mean by that? I would always question, why am I so much taller than you guys? My mom has green eyes. I have green eyes. I literally look exactly like my mother. The only thing was I was taller than my mom, my dad, my brother. And my mom, every time I would bring that up, she would just say, "Oh, you're tall like my brothers," because my uncles were pretty tall gentlemen.
Hmm.
And I was just like, okay. I remember my brother used to tease me when I was little, and he would always tease me about my earlobes. But I always chalked it up to it's just your older brother picking on you. You know what I mean? Like, I just never, ever felt, I never had a clue. I never would have thought anything different. I never felt different than anybody else. Not until I started getting a little bit older. And when I started getting a little bit older, the feeling was that my parents loved my brother more than they loved me. And I expressed that all of the time. And when I say that they loved him more than they loved me, let me just clear that up. I didn't feel less loved. I just felt that they put up with things that he did more so and gave him so many passes. And I didn't think it was fair. So it was coming from a place of fairness and like, why do you allow him to get away with this? And know how to, I didn't know how to understand that. Later on in life, I understood that his behavior was more towards like black sheep type things. And I think that they just, you know how sometimes you say like that child needs more attention than the other one? And my mom would tell me over and over and over again, we don't have to worry about you. You don't give us anything to worry about. Not that I was perfect, but I I did things correctly and was very responsible, and they didn't have to worry about me. So I left it at that. A little bit later on, that's around like my mid 20s. A little bit later on, I did feel that it was them three, and I felt like an outlier, an outsider. But I would speak to my uncle on my dad's side, and he would say, "Honey, a lot of times when he would, and he even he drew it out for me. Here's a circle, and inside is your nucleus. The moment you start getting higher education, the moment you start traveling, the moment you start doing different things outside of that nucleus, you become an outsider because you no longer have the same likes or the same, sometimes even values change." And that was hard for me because I was one of the few people at the moment going for my bachelor's degree and studying and making changes. I had a couple of other cousins that did that. Now, forget about it. A lot of us in my family are first gens, but at the moment, it wasn't that way. And so it was really challenging to say, oh, well, I don't like this anymore that we used to like. And I didn't have like, what's the word? I didn't feel as compatible with them as I used to because maybe I had changed a little bit and shifted a little bit in my mindset. And so that was kind of like the change. And so I felt different from them. And I had never really expressed that to anyone until I got married and was able to express it to my husband.
Jennifer, how did you find out you were an NPE?
So, and this is where my story begins, right? So, I have an amazing group of friends, and we decided to meet up Veterans Weekend 2019. We had seen each other, but not all together in over 20 years. And we decided to connect at in Atlanta. One hosted, and we all came with our spouses. We were talking, and one of the things that really connects us, and we all pretty much grew up the same way, our parents being from Colombia, our parents being immigrants, our parents being hard workers. One of the things that really connects us is music and all of the memories that we share. And we were just at the apartment, and our spouses are getting to know one another. They had already met separately, but we're just all like really vibing together. And one of us say something like, wouldn't it be so cool to find out how African we are? Because you have to understand that where my family comes from, it's a mixture. Obviously, the native Indians were there. Then the Europeans came over and they brought slaves. And we are a huge mixture of multiculturalism and multiracial people, right? And we're all just like, we love our music and the essence of the drums. And there's just a lot of folklore that comes from our African ancestors. And we always joke around and we would say, how Black are we? Because that's how we identify. I mean, we don't identify as fully like full Black race, but we know that we're very mixed. And one of them said, oh, I did Ancestry. And we were like, no way. No, you didn't. And so that went really down, started the conversation of, we've got to do it. Hey, let's do it. So I ended up buying the kit. My friend at the time also bought the kit. And that was November 2019. I purchased the kit, put it in a cupboard, literally forgot about it. I think I registered for it because you have to in order to order it. And I kept my life moving. Then the pandemic came. I was a school teacher at the time, and we all know how that went for school teachers. And it was a very hectic time trying to do these, all the things. And so we have a group chat, the three of us. And what ended up happening was like, I would get like a gentle reminder, hey, when are you going to send your kid in? When are you going to send your kid in? And so finally, the one friend that had not sent it in finally sends it in like around June. He gets his results, and it was what we had anticipated. This percentage European, this percentage indigenous, this percent African. And, then they have like the little percentages of 1% Jewish, 1% Italian, things like that. So, we were laughing and we were going back and forth. I ended up having knee surgery. So, of course, then that's another reason why not to do the ancestry. And I finally took it because another gentle nudge, it said, hey, come on, let's, do your thing. And so I finally sent it in. And on August 20th of 2020, as I'm driving to school, I get the notification that I had my results in. And I was so excited. I just remember being super excited that morning about it. And in the initial email, it had the picture of my friend who had just taken it as of very close. Now, mind you, I'm looking at this through my phone, so I'm not 100% aware of what's going on, but it said that it was a close relative, right? Like a close match, whatever that is. Honestly, that's a blur to me because what happens right after was all of the craziness. So I got really emotional because I thought for a moment that we were cousins, because my mom's side of the family is really hard to keep up with because, and I'm talking about my grandmother being born in like the early 1900s. They came from a very small village, if you will, outside of a bigger city. And it was, everybody was related somehow. I'm thinking that my friend's mom and my mom are distant relatives, some way, somehow that they didn't know. And this is how we're cousins. That is what I thought. I get in my car, and the first phone call that I made was to my brother. And I'm driving, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I just got my ancestry. And it turns out that our friend is now our cousin. And my brother was quiet. He just let me talk. I was blurting out a lot of excitement. And he says to me, Jen, please don't dig or ask any more questions. And I was like, why? And he says, well, because my dad is not your biological father. And I was like, excuse me? And I was trying to add up all of what he just told me with the picture. And I'm just like, then he says to me, our friend's dad is your biological dad. And I'm like, there's no way. There's no way. And I just felt like my world turned upside down because now my best friend that we've been friends since I was 9 years old is now potentially my half brother. And I had a gazillion questions and I was hysterical. I literally cried all my way to work. And when I get to work, I couldn't be at work. But in the midst of that, my first period was my planning period, luckily for me. And so my friend calls me and he's like, Jen, I just opened up this email. And according to the numbers, it says that we could potentially be half siblings. What in the world is going on? And we're both crying. We're both like, what is happening? So I left work, and the next 72 hours are pretty much a blur. Like I we were just we went from we're taking this to the grave, nobody needs to know, to now me being on a podcast telling my story. Like there were so many emotions that were running through, and I asked him to please contact his biological father because he was not raised by his biological father. He had a stepfather who took care of him growing up. And I said, can you please call him and ask if he ever had a relationship with my mom? So he did me the solid. He was reluctant initially, but helped me try to understand what this news was that we had just received. And his bio dad said, yes, I did have a relationship with her. So that was like, okay, he's just confirmed that he had an affair with my mother. And I was in complete denial that ancestry was accurate. It was probably the hardest 72 hours of my life. Even just talking about it at this moment brings up a lot of anxiety for me. And I feel the same way that I felt at that moment, which was really, really challenging. So on the phone with me were my two friends, right? Like the ones that we were in Atlanta together, and we're trying to figure out what this news is and what it means and who is this going to affect. And that was on a Thursday. We were on the phone on Friday, and my therapist saw me literally for 3 hours on Saturday to try to understand and process all of this. And that is how I found out that the dad for 45 years, who to me and still to this day is my dad, was not my biological father.
I have goosebumps listening to all that. How incredibly shocking.
It was extremely shocking.
Mm. Were you able to function at that time?
Barely, barely functioning. I found myself crying almost every day, waking up in the middle of the night, barely functioning at work. I made a very conscious effort and decision to only speak to my new half brother, my friend, on Mondays, and then we would not talk for the rest of the week. I just had to block it out the rest of the week. I would go see my therapist, and she would see me literally for 2 hours at a time because I couldn't, there was time constraints. So it was hard for me to go multiple times a week. So she'd see me like one day and we would talk. And then obviously I spoke to my husband almost on a daily basis, but with my friend, we were just talking once a week because I just couldn't handle it more than that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's incredibly overwhelming. You had to, for your mental health, just put it on one day. You'd speak with him.
Mm-hmm. The hardest part for me during all of this was my crying, the anxiety, and having to navigate my children because they were seeing me sad all the time and like, are you okay? What's wrong? And I didn't know what was going to happen next. Like, I didn't know how to maneuver. So, one thing that I am extremely grateful for is that I had my husband literally rubbing my back in the middle of the nights and just being there, just being fully present and just not even saying a word, just being there. And being able to contact my two friends at morning, noon, night, they were always available. My therapist and my faith. That is what got me through those beginning months.
Now, what happened with time?
Well, with time, a lot of healing has happened. Relationships have blossomed. I am definitely not the same person that I was 4.5 years ago. I feel like I have changed. I also feel like I have, sometimes I don't want to say not for the best, but I know that I have changed. So many things have happened that are positive for me. And so I'm super grateful for that. But let me just share this. So I was in complete and utter denial. I was in complete and utter denial. So there are so many coincidences or not in my story that little by little started coming up. So my maiden name is my maiden name, right? But I married my husband and became Ruiz, and that should have been my family name. Weird, right? Like it's just we start.
Really?
Yes. One of the phone calls that I received from my now new brother, who was my best friend forever and ever, one of the phone calls that or conversations that we had was, your world has been turned upside down. We've always been friends, but now I've gained a sister. And he was just like, and I want you to know that however you want to maneuver this situation, I'm open either way. Like, if we just want to continue to be friends, that's great. But if now that we know that we're like blood related, and we always felt like we were we even have like our little group chat family, like friends that become family, because we've always been all so close since we were young. And so it's like now we've it's not that we're no longer family, but like we are legit family now, like blood family. So,
Yeah.
and then the next thing that he said was, I spoke to my sister. This is him talking. I spoke to my sister, and she just wants to let you know that whenever you're ready to talk, you can call her, and that you have a sister.
Oh, so
Oh my
sweet.
gosh. And I remember growing up, one of the things is that my cousins were my sisters, but I always wanted a sister, like of my own. Cause like my tia, my mom's twin, had four daughters, mostly women in the family, but I was like the only one without a sister. And I always wanted a sister.
Mm.
And so that to me was like huge, right? So I was in denial, and my therapist said, is there a way that you could possibly get like a real DNA test? Not that ancestry is not real, but like one of those like where they do it like for the custody or the paternity, or like an actual paternity test. So I started researching, and I ended up taking one of those LabCorp tests. And so around October of the same year, so now my new brother and my new sister and I took one of those swab tests, and we sent it to LabCorp, and the results came in October. At this point, we're not talking to anyone about it, right? Like, my brother had spoken to his bio dad, who was my bio dad. And it's weird sometimes to really
Mhm.
say it, but um,
Yeah.
spoken to him, and we kind of left it at that, didn't talk to anything. And I was still continuing to have conversations with my mom like normal. And like after hanging up, crying or feeling some type of way. But I didn't want to talk to her until I actually knew for sure. And that was October 1st of 2020 is when I knew for sure. The result came back, and it said that 99.99999% that I was their half sister.
Mhm.
So fast forward to the next day, I called another one of our childhood friends, and I said to her, hey, I took an ancestry test. And she finished my sentence by saying, please don't tell me that our friend's dad is your dad. And I was like, how would you know this?
Wow.
So let me just backtrack for a second. When, with all of this happening, all I felt was a ton of admiration for my parents. My parents this year will be married 60 years. And I was like, all I kept thinking was, wow, they they're amazing people. They I thought three different things. Does my dad know? Does my mom know? Like, what in the, like, I had all these different types of questions, and I just didn't know what to make of it. So at that moment, I never felt anger towards my parents. Like, why did they lie to me? Why didn't they tell me? Just wasn't feeling that. I can't explain why. I just didn't feel that. I felt nothing but love and admiration for these two human beings that made it work, and never showed my brother and I anything different than just love and respect. Like one of the things my mom was huge on and would always tell me, you always have to respect your spouse. You've got to respect, like, respect was like a huge thing. I never heard them cuss at each other, never heard them, nothing. Like beautiful, not perfect, but just a beautiful relationship. And they were admired by our community. And that's the beginning of my process, was that just full admiration for these two human beings that went through stuff. And typically, I don't know if this happens in other cultures. I can only speak for myself. It's like we idolize our parents and think that they do no wrong. And so the two of these imperfect people are just making it work. And one of the things that I admired the most about my parents' relationship as an adult was that I never saw a glimpse of jealousy, either or. I never, ever, ever, I never heard my dad say, no, you can't go, or my mom say, no, you can't go. They vacationed together apart, and it was never an issue. Not what your typical situation would be if someone was unfaithful. You know what I mean? Like that just, and I always admired that, and I always wanted that for me. Once I found out that, and I spoke to my girlfriend, I said, I'm going to go and talk to my parents, but I can't go until December while I'm on my Christmas break. And she really encouraged me to not wait. She said, Jen, go and go now. Like, seriously, you've got to go as soon as possible. And so we found out October 1st. I was on an airplane October 21st. And I gave my parents this whole mumbo jumbo story about me having to go look for something there as far as my dual citizenship. And I got on an airplane right smack in the middle of COVID, and I planned for 5 days. And this is what I was expecting. I was expecting, number one, that she like legit have a heart attack and die, like because of the news. And my therapist would always poke fun at me and say, why do you Latinos think that you're going to kill your elders? You're not going to kill your elders. She's going to be perfectly fine. As a matter of fact, she was probably going to be relieved. and so, and so I just thought she was literally going to die. Or I thought she was going to be aggressive towards me and like, like once you receive this news, be angry and be aggressive towards me. And then my third thought was, I'm going to sit in front of her, hold her hands, close my eyes, pray, and just have all these angels around me, around us, and it just be a loving conversation. And that's what happened. I sat in front of her at a mall, and we grabbed a cup of coffee the day that I arrived, and I prayed, and I told her that I needed to have a conversation with her, that I had recently found out the truth and that I wasn't there to judge her, that I loved her very much, and that I admired her and my dad for raising and keeping our family together, and that whatever she wanted to share with me, I was open for her to share. And whatever she didn't want to share, I would respect her privacy. And she looked at me, never denied it. Honestly, I can't remember exactly what she said in that moment. And we just held hands really tight. I was crying. She reminded me of one of those women of Bold and the Beautiful, like just so stoic, just sitting there in front of me, didn't shed one tear. And she was like, yes, it is true. And my next question was, well, does dad know? Because then that would have been how I would have maneuvered then. Like, does he know? Does he not know? And she said, no, he knows. And I was like, oh, okay. So then that'll be another conversation. She said, let me talk to him tonight. And she said, I pray and I ask for God's forgiveness every day that I wake up. And I just was afraid that if I ever told you, I would lose my daughter. And I wasn't ready to lose you. The following day, we went home and I had a long trip. And the following day, as soon as I woke up and I saw my dad, I just hugged him and cried and said, thank you. And he said, you're my daughter, and that's never going to change. And I love you, and those two girls are my grandchildren, and that's it. End of story. We did have the opportunity to talk a little bit later on. And one of the things that I remember as a part of my process was I never want to intentionally hurt my dad. He was always in the forefront of any decision that I made as far as sharing or, anything like that. I always felt very protective of him and how he felt. And I didn't want to hurt him was my initial reaction. You know, when I spoke to them for those brief 5 days that I was there, he said to me, I wish you would have never found out. I can only imagine how painful this is for you. But I love your mother. She is the woman that I married. And maybe it was the way I was raised by my dad and my granddad that divorce was never an option. But I'm so glad that I hung in there and I stuck it out. And she's the woman he said, ella es la mujer de mi vida, which means she is the woman of my life. I don't even know how to translate it, but it translates to like, that's just his love.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we held hands, we walked around the city, and he just reiterated that nothing changes and that we're still family. This is us. Later on, I did ask him when he had found out about me, and he said that when I was around 8 years old, he found out that I was not his biological daughter. And so, tough times for them. And one of the things that I know for me personally is, who am I to judge my mom? And I know that listening to other NPE stories and being part of Facebook NPE communities, a lot of people are angry towards their moms. And listen, everyone has their own different story. The one thing that for me really sticks out is I don't know what their marriage was like. I don't know why she made the decision. The one thing that my therapist always says is, do not say that you're a mistake. Your mom didn't make a mistake. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. And that really helped me a lot. The truth of the matter is she made a decision, and I was the outcome of that decision.
Mm.
Yeah. And so to go back to your question about time, what has happened for me through time is obviously a lot of healing, but time. And so the first 2 years, I was really just my direct family, my husband and my two girls. My parents begged me not to tell my children because I know that with this comes a lot of shame and guilt, right? My dad said to me, I don't want to lose my grandchildren. Still don't understand what he meant by that. Like, did he think that they were just going to wake up one morning and say, we don't love Papu? That's what they call him. And I never understood that. And as I processed, I felt that that was a very selfish ask. And so I did speak to my children, like within about a year after finding out. And they were completely fine. I think they were like 12 and 9 or 13 and 10 at the time. And they were completely fine with it. And my oldest daughter said to me, I said, I wanted to wait till you guys got older. And they were like, no, we're so glad that we know now. And at that moment,
Mm.
I felt like the secret was going to end with us. Like, you know, we were not going to hold on to the secret. I wasn't going to hold on to the secret. So fast forward to 2022, and I started to be able to connect with my new family. And that gave me a connection to 2 additional brothers and 3 sisters, which was what I wanted my whole entire life. I wanted sisters, right? I have 7 nieces and nephews. I not and 2 of them are married, so then I have these bonus niece and nephew. I have 1 great nephew and a great niece. 3 brother-in-laws, 2 sister-in-laws, and I finally connected with my bio dad. It took me about 3 years, and his wife is just amazing. And so I now have like this, all the fears that I had, and it wasn't so much rejection, it was more of, I feel like I'm just going to use the word, but I felt like I was cheating on my dad, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Right? Like it
Yeah.
just felt like I should have, what's the word I'm looking for? Like I should have this loyalty towards him. And if I spoke to people so let me explain. So bio dad, first marriage, 3 children. Second marriage, which by the way, these 3 siblings I've known my entire life.
Mm.
I've known them for my entire life. Sometimes that's felt that that was even more painful because we've been missing out. You know, a lot of this NPE story comes with like missing out, and I already have FOMO as it is. Like I was just like, oh my god, all these years I missed out on my nieces, my nephews, opportunities to travel with my siblings. That side, right? Because I knew them my whole entire life. Then, second marriage, there was a brother that was the one after me, but he died. And then 2 additional sisters and his wife, and then one of them has a daughter. One of them has a child, the other one doesn't have a child. And so then you factor in that again, oh man, I lost out all these opportunities of meeting my family. And that comes with a lot of sadness. And I've mourned so many different stages of my process. The mourning of not being able to meet my one brother who's now deceased, the mourning of not being able to know my nieces and nephews at a very young age because my brother, the one I grew up with, doesn't have children. So I was a non-aunt. You know what I mean? Like
Mm-hmm.
and he's 8 years older than me, and there's right now there's no potential for him having children. So time gave me all of these new family members. And Lily, when I tell you that they have been so accepting and loving and just beautiful human beings, not that I wasn't expecting it, but I wasn't expecting it that way, if that makes sense.
Mm.
Because they don't know who I am. And I'm talking about the second marriage siblings. Like they don't know me. With the other ones I had a connection with just because we knew each other from the same town, our family. I mean, there's a lot of connections there. But with the other ones, and even so, there still felt a little bit of the possibility of rejection, and has not been the case at all. They have been amazing, understanding, loving. I've had many breakthroughs thanks to them. I will say when I went to finally visit, because I would go to Atlanta to visit my friend, now brother, but not see the rest of the family. Then he hosted one day so that the girls could meet the everybody, right? My niece said very, very, very nonchalantly to a friend, "Oh, let me introduce you to my tia." And at that point, I had been feeling very just awkward. Like, how do I maneuver this? Like, what do I say? And she said it so nonchalantly. It just literally just not just broke the ice, but like just broke all different types of barriers. At
Yeah.
another gathering, one of the older nephews just comes up to me, gives me this warm embrace. "Hi, Tia." And I'm like, oh my gosh, I am loved and accepted, no questions asked. And Lily, that just felt so good.
I love hearing this so much, Jennifer. I love this for you. And like you said, I wish every NPE would have this sort of story, this sort of loving acceptance from their new family. And you still have this beautiful relationship with your family of origin as well.
Hmm.
Mm.
Absolutely. Once I started being able to talk about it, I even went back and spoke to my mom's side of the family. I have yet to speak to my dad's side of the family, but they all knew. And one of the things that I got out of all of this is that I felt protected, even though some people may not understand that. I felt super protected and loved, and nobody ever slipped or said. And I think that that was due to a lot of the respect that they had for my parents, and I really admire that. My my new family is very careful about my dad's feelings, and I appreciate that. It's just been beautiful, and I've been able to now see my bio dad several times. I've traveled to Colombia. I've been able to meet with my two sisters, and just even if it's just a an hour dinner, I've been able to connect with them and connect with my older siblings and my nieces and nephews, and it's I feel very welcome from
Mm.
all sides. I haven't made it a point yet of reaching out to my dad's family. I just out of respect. But I have a feeling that they know.
And Jennifer, if anyone listening today has questions or wanted to connect with you personally, could they do that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. They can send me an email. I'm super old school, so don't make fun of my email. But it's JAYCA. So that's JAYCA 519 at AOL.com.
I'm absolutely going to make fun of your email address. I love it.
I've had it since
Oh,
1999, I think.
yes, girl. I wish I'd hung on to mine. Oh, Jennifer, this was, wow, really lovely to hear all of this for you and your family and your connections. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story today. I appreciate you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been an honor and a pleasure. This is part of my journey, part of my healing process. And if I could be of assistance or help, or even just to listen to just one person and help them through this, I will be more than happy to.
These stories are here for us to identify with. If you are an NPE and would like to share your story, email npestories@gmail.com. You do not have to give any identifying information. If you are an NPE and would like to share your story, I'd like to hear from you. Subscribe to this podcast to hear more. Come heal with us.